The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal floor. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated chambers, their forms ranging from the insect-like Chitauri to the gaseous Nephil who floated in containment spheres. They had gathered for a routine session, or so most of them believed. The agenda showed only one item: application for membership, species human, planet of origin Earth. Ambassador Thelnox of the Viridian Collective rose from his seat. His blue skin shimmered under the hall's ambient light as he activated the central display. Images of Earth appeared, showing a blue and green world that looked peaceful from orbit. But Thelnox's expression held no warmth. "Esteemed council members," he began, his voice carrying through the translation matrix that allowed all species to understand each other. "I stand before you to discuss a matter of grave concern. The species calling themselves humans have requested entry into our council. I have reviewed their application, their history, and their cultural records. What I discovered has left me deeply troubled." The display changed, showing images from Earth's history. Battlefields covered in bodies, cities reduced to ash, weapons of terrible power destroying entire populations in moments. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "This species has been at war with itself for its entire recorded history," Thelnox continued. "They have developed over 15,000 different ways to kill each other. They possess weapons capable of rendering their own planet uninhabitable, and they have come close to using them multiple times. Their entertainment media glorifies violence. Their children play games that simulate combat. War is woven into the very fabric of their culture." A Chitauri representative clicked its mandibles. The sound translated as concern. "Surely, all species go through aggressive phases during their development. We ourselves had conflicts in our ancient past." "Not like this," Thelnox replied, his voice sharp. "Our conflicts were brief, resolved through negotiation within generations. Humans have been fighting organized wars for over 10,000 years. Even now, as they reach for the stars, they maintain vast military forces. They have entire branches of their armed forces dedicated to what they call special operations." He pulled up files on the display. Text and images showed military units with names that sounded harsh even through translation. Navy SEALs, Special Air Service, Spetsnaz, Delta Force, Special Forces. Each file contained training regimens that made several council members recoil in horror. "These units," Thelnox explained, "are trained to operate behind enemy lines. They learn to kill in hundreds of different ways. They practice something called enhanced interrogation. They undergo torture as part of their training to prepare for capture. They volunteer for this. These are not conscripts forced into service. These humans choose to become weapons." The council chamber filled with murmurs of disbelief. The Nephil representative sphere pulsed with agitated colors. "This cannot be accurate. No sapient species would willingly brutalize its own members as training." "I verified the data 3 times, Thelnox said. "Human Special Forces operators endure sleep deprivation, exposure to extreme temperatures, starvation, waterboarding, and psychological stress that would break any of our soldiers. They call it selection. Only a small percentage survive the process. Those who do become part of elite units that conduct operations in secret, often with no oversight or accountability." The display showed training footage that human militaries had declassified. Council members watched in horrified fascination as human soldiers moved through obstacle courses, practiced hand-to-hand combat, and conducted live-fire exercises with a precision that seemed impossible for organic beings. "I move that we reject this application immediately," Thelnox declared. "Humanity is too violent, too unstable, too dangerous to join civilized society. They will bring their wars to our peaceful galaxy." Before the vote could be called, alarms shrieked through the council hall. The central display flickered and changed, showing incoming emergency transmissions. A Krell warship filled the screen, its hull covered in jagged armor and weapon ports. Behind it, hundreds more ships emerged from hyperspace. The Krell had been a problem for the Council for decades. They were an aggressive empire that believed in expansion through conquest. The Council had managed to keep them contained through defensive treaties and the threat of unified retaliation. But now, it seemed, the Krell had decided the Council was weak enough to attack. "This is War Master Krexthor of the Krell Imperium." A guttural voice boomed through the chamber. "Your council has grown soft and pathetic. We claim the worlds of Sanctuary 7, Forge Prime, and New Viridian as Krell territory. Resist, and we will exterminate your populations. You have 6 of your hours to evacuate all military forces and surrender authority." The transmission cut off. The council erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding action, calling for their defense fleets, arguing about protocol. The council's military forces were ceremonial at best, designed to patrol trade routes and handle pirates. They had never faced a full-scale invasion. Felnox stood frozen, watching the tactical display as Krell forces began orbital bombardment of Sanctuary 7. His own people lived on that world. Millions of Viridians were about to die, and the Council had no way to stop it. The human ambassador, who had been sitting quietly throughout the proceedings, rose from her seat. Sarah Chen was a small woman by human standards, but she carried herself with a confidence that seemed outsized for her frame. She approached the Council podium without being recognized, a breach of protocol that would normally cause outrage. No one stopped her. "Esteemed Council," she said calmly, as if the galaxy wasn't currently falling apart around them. "Earth offers its assistance in this crisis. We can have military forces in position within 48 hours. We can stop the Krell advance and protect Council worlds." Felnox stared at her. "You want to send your warriors, your special forces? We have just spent the last hour discussing how violent and dangerous your species is, and now you offer to unleash that violence in our space?" "Ambassador Felnox, you have a choice. You can maintain your principles and watch millions die while you debate the moral implications of self-defense. Or you can accept our help and let us do what we do best. We understand if you find our methods distasteful, but right now, distasteful methods are what will save lives." The Council chamber fell silent. On the displays, Sanctuary 7 burned. Reports were coming in of Krell shock troops landing in cities, executing civilians who couldn't evacuate in time. The Council's own defense forces were being slaughtered in orbit, their ships no match for Krell military technology. The High Chancellor, an elderly member of the eldest species who rarely spoke, activated his microphone. His voice creaked with age, but carried absolute authority. "The Council accepts Earth's offer of military assistance. Deploy your forces, Ambassador Chen. Save our people." Sarah nodded once, sharp and efficient. She activated her communication device and spoke in the harsh, clipped language of military English. "This is Ambassador Chen. Authorization code Sierra 7 Victor. Activate Operation Guardian. Full deployment of JSOC assets to Council space. Rules of engagement. Protect Council civilians. Eliminate Krell military presence. No mercy for war crimes." She closed the channel and looked at the assembled Council. "Our forces will arrive soon. I suggest you prepare your citizens. Humans fight differently than you're used to. It might be disturbing to watch, but we will stop the Krell." Felnox felt a chill run through his body. He had argued against human membership because they were too violent. Now he was about to see exactly what that violence looked like when directed at an enemy. He had invited demons to fight demons. He wondered if the Council would survive what came next, even if they won. The city of Haven on Sanctuary 7 was burning. Krell shock troops moved through the streets in formation, their reptilian bodies covered in heavy combat armor. They were executing a systematic purge of the civilian population, following their standard conquest protocol. The Viridian defenders had fallen within the first hour. Now there was nothing between the Krell and millions of helpless citizens, except time. Observer Pelmike of the Council Oversight Committee huddled in a makeshift command post on the city's outskirts. He had been assigned to monitor human military conduct and report any violations of warfare protocols. The Council wanted documentation if humans proved as barbaric as their files suggested. So far, Pelmike had nothing to report because he hadn't seen any humans yet. They said forces were deploying 12 hours ago, he muttered to his assistant, a young Chitauri named Siklik. Where are they? Unknown, observer. Siklik replied, her mandibles clicking nervously. Human ships entered orbit 6 hours ago, but have not engaged the Krell fleet. Their dropships landed in the wilderness outside the city. Since then, nothing. No communications, no troop movements, no activity. Pelmike checked his scanner again. The device showed Krell positions throughout Haven, marked in red. Council civilian concentrations showed in blue, clustering in buildings and underground shelters, trapped and terrified. But there were no green markers for human forces. It was as if they had simply vanished after landing. This is unacceptable, Pelmike said. I'm filing a complaint with Ambassador Chen. The humans promised to help, but they're doing nothing while civilians die. Before he could activate his communicator, every light in the command post went dark. Emergency power failed, even the displays died. Pelmike heard Siklik's chittering cry of alarm in the darkness. Then, just as suddenly, power returned. Standing in the center of the room was a human. Pelmike's secondary heart nearly stopped. He hadn't heard a door open. He hadn't heard footsteps. The human had simply appeared like a ghost, materializing from shadow. The figure was covered head to toe in adaptive camouflage that seemed to drink in light. Night vision goggles covered the eyes. Weapons bristled from every attachment point on the armor. No skin was visible. Nothing about the figure looked remotely friendly. Observer Pelmike, the human said, voice flat and mechanical through a communication device. I'm Captain Mitchell. Call sign Wraith 1. We're beginning operations. Stay in this location and do not interfere. You, Pelmike stammered. Where have you been? The city is being massacred. You are supposed to help. We've been preparing. Reconnaissance, target identification, terrain mapping, enemy force assessment. We don't rush into combat blind. We study, we plan, then we execute. But people are dying right now. Mitchell's head tilted slightly. Yes, they are. And in approximately 4 minutes, people will start dying much faster. But this time, it will be the right people. The human touched a device on his wrist and spoke in that harsh military language. All Wraith elements, this is Wraith 1. Execute Phase 1. Targets are marked. Rules of engagement. Any Krell carrying weapons in civilian areas are hostile. Engage at will. No mercy. Then Mitchell did something that made Pelmike's blood turn cold. The human smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. Mitchell vanished. One moment he stood in the command post. The next he was gone, moving so quickly and quietly that Pelmike's eyes couldn't track the movement. The door hadn't opened. The human had simply ceased to be there. What just happened? Siklik whispered. Pelmike pulled up his scanner with shaking hands. For a moment, nothing changed on the display. The Krell forces continued their advance through Haven, red markers moving methodically through city blocks. Then, one by one, those red markers began disappearing. Not retreating, not regrouping, simply ceasing to exist. Pelmike increased magnification on one section of the city. A Krell patrol, 12 soldiers strong, was moving down a main street. He watched their markers advance. Then, the last marker in the formation vanished. The others continued forward unaware. 5 seconds later, another marker disappeared. Then another. "They're being picked off," Sick observed, her voice high with stress. "But there's no indication of combat, no weapons fire, no explosions, nothing." Pelmike switched to the command post's surveillance feeds. The Council had cameras throughout Haven for traffic management and security. He pulled up footage from the street where the Krell patrol was dying. The image showed the patrol moving in formation, weapons ready, scanning for threats. The last soldier in line simply collapsed, falling face first onto the pavement. His companions didn't notice for several steps. When they finally turned, there was no enemy visible. Just their dead comrade lying in the street with a small hole in the back of his helmet. While they were distracted, another soldier fell. This one made no sound. One moment standing, the next crumpling like his strings had been cut. The surviving Krell opened fire at nothing, their plasma rounds tearing into buildings and empty air. They were panicking, Pelmike realized. These hardened shock troops, who had terrorized the Council for decades, were panicking. The remaining Krell broke formation and ran, abandoning all discipline. It didn't help. One by one they fell, killed by an enemy they never saw. The last Krell soldier stood alone in the middle of the street, spinning in circles, firing wildly in all directions. He was screaming in his own language, words the translator rendered as demons, demons in the shadows. Then he fell too, and the street was silent. Pelmike switched to another camera feed. A Krell command squad had fortified a position inside a council government building. They had sentries posted, heavy weapons aimed at every entrance, overlapping fields of fire that should have made the position impregnable. Pelmike watched as one sentry simply slumped forward against his weapon. The others didn't notice because the body remained upright, wedged in position. A small object flew through a window and landed among the Krell. They had perhaps half a second to recognize it as a grenade before it detonated. The explosion was small, contained, but devastating in the enclosed space. Before the smoke cleared, human shapes moved through the windows and doorways, weapons firing in controlled bursts. The entire engagement lasted perhaps 10 seconds. When it was over, every Krell in the building was dead. The humans moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, confirming kills, collecting intelligence, then vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. "This isn't warfare," Pelmike whispered. "This is extermination." Sick pulled up communication intercepts from Krell military channels. The translations came through garbled and frantic. Krell commanders were reporting contact with enemy forces, but their descriptions made no sense. Enemies that appeared from nowhere, weapons that killed without sound. Soldiers who moved like ghosts and struck like lightning. One Krell battalion commander was screaming into his communicator. "We are not fighting soldiers. We are being hunted. They are in the walls. They are in the shadows. We kill nothing but air, and our own men fall. Requesting immediate extraction. The demons are here." Pelmike watched his scanner as the red markers throughout Haven continued to disappear. The Krell had entered the city with over 3,000 troops. In less than 2 hours, fewer than 500 remained. And those survivors were in full retreat, abandoning their positions, their mission, their discipline. They were running in blind panic toward their dropships. The humans let them run. Pelmike watched as escape routes opened up, corridors through the city where no humans operated, allowing the Krell to flee. He realized with growing horror that this was intentional. The humans were allowing survivors to escape so they could spread fear among the Krell forces. Captain Mitchell reappeared in the command post as silently as before. His armor was clean. There was no blood, no sign of combat. He could have been returning from a training exercise. "Phase 1 complete," Mitchell reported. "Haven is secure. Krell forces eliminated or routed. Civilian casualties during our operation, 0. Our casualties, 0. Moving to Phase 2, clearing outlying settlements. Pelmike found his voice. You killed thousands of them. I watched the whole thing. It was efficient, Mitchell supplied. That's the word you're looking for, Observer. We did our job efficiently. The Krell came here to murder civilians. We stopped them. That's what you asked us to do. But your methods, Pelmike protested. The ambushes, the stealth kills, the psychological warfare. This is assassination. Mitchell's expression, visible now that he had removed his goggles, was completely neutral. Observer Pelmike, let me explain something to you. Honor is a luxury. It's something you can afford when you're strong enough that fighting fair doesn't cost lives. We're here to protect Council civilians, not to give the Krell sporting chance. If that disturbs you, file your report. But my mission continues. The human vanished again, melting into shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide him. Pelmike sat down heavily. His hands were shaking. He had witnessed the beginning of human military operations, and already he knew he would never forget what he had seen. The Council had unleashed something into this war that operated by rules he didn't understand. Sicklick was reviewing the surveillance footage again, playing back the moments when humans had struck. Observer, she said quietly. I don't think they're human soldiers. What do you mean? Soldiers fight battles. Soldiers engage enemies. These humans don't fight. They hunt. They're predators. Pelmike looked at his scanner. Across Sanctuary 7, red markers were disappearing as human special forces conducted their operations. The Krell didn't call them soldiers or warriors in their panicked communications. They called them demons. And Pelmike was beginning to understand why. Observer Pelmike had been documenting human military operations for 3 weeks. His reports to the Council grew longer and more disturbing with each passing day. What he witnessed on Sanctuary 7 was just the beginning. Now, on the industrial world of Forge Prime, he was about to see something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Krell had transformed Forge Prime's primary manufacturing complex into a fortress. Intelligence suggested they were using it as a processing center, though processing what remained unclear. The complex sprawled across 50 square miles of industrial architecture, all heavy metal and reinforced structures designed to withstand the extreme heat of orbital foundries. Pelmike sat in a human command vehicle, surrounded by operators who moved with quiet efficiency. Captain Mitchell stood before a holographic display, showing the complex in detail. Other humans, their faces painted with dark camouflage, listened to his briefing. Intelligence confirms the complex is being used for executions, Mitchell said, his voice calm as if discussing the weather. The Krell are processing Council civilians who they've deemed non-compliant. Estimated 2,000 prisoners inside, guard force of approximately 300 Krell, heavily armed. They've got anti-aircraft batteries, hardened bunkers, and overlapping kill zones. A frontal assault would cost us casualties and likely result in prisoner deaths. One of the other humans, a woman whose uniform identified her as Lieutenant Reeves, pointed to a section of the display. This cooling tower connects to the underground detention level. We breach here, move through the industrial pipes, come up inside their perimeter. Mitchell nodded. Good. We'll split into 4 teams. Wraith, Ghost, Shadow, and Reaper elements. Simultaneous breach at 4 points. The moment the Krell know we're there, they'll start executing prisoners. We need to neutralize the guard force before they can react. Pelmike raised one of his forearms hesitantly. Captain Mitchell, I must protest this plan. Attacking a fortified position is one thing, but intelligence suggests some Krell inside may be non-combatants. Administrative personnel, technical staff. The rules of warfare require you to distinguish between combatants and civilians. The humans turned to look at him. Their expressions were unreadable, but Pelmike felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing. These were not people who appreciated being questioned during operational planning. Mitchell stepped closer. "Observer, let me show you something." He pulled up surveillance footage on a smaller display. The images showed the interior of the complex, captured by Council intelligence drones before they were shot down. Pelmike watched as Krell's soldiers forced a group of Viridian civilians into a large room. The civilians were bound, terrified. They were families, he realized, children clinging to parents. What happened next made Pelmike's stomach turn. The Krell executed them. Not quickly, not mercifully. They took their time. They made it hurt. Mitchell let the footage play for 30 seconds before stopping it. "Those administrative personnel and technical staff you're worried about? They were there. They watched. Some of them participated. This isn't a military base, observer. It's an extermination camp. And everyone inside is complicit." "But surely there must be some who are just following orders," Pelmike protested weakly. "Some who have no choice." "Following orders isn't an excuse," Mitchell replied coldly. "Every Krell in that complex has made a choice to participate in genocide. We're going to hold them accountable for that choice." Another human spoke up, a scarred operator called Sergeant Diaz. "Observer, you need to understand something about us. We've studied our own history. We've seen what happens when good people do nothing while evil people act. We've seen the death camps, the mass graves, the systematic slaughter of innocent populations. We swore never again, not to our own people, and not to anyone else who needs help." "But your methods," Pelmike said. "You fight without honor. You use terror and fear. You're becoming like them." Lieutenant Reeves shook her head. "No, observer, we're nothing like them. They kill the innocent and helpless. We kill the guilty and dangerous. There's a difference. Maybe it's hard for you to see, but it's there." Mitchell returned his attention to the holographic display. "We execute in 30 minutes. Wraith Element, you're with me. Our objective is the command center. Ghost Element takes the detention block. Shadow and Reaper clear the facility level by level. Rules of engagement. Any Krell inside the perimeter is hostile. No mercy." "No mercy protocol," Pelmike whispered. He had heard this phrase before, in other operations. It chilled him every time. Mitchell looked at him. "That's right. No mercy. The Krell showed none to their victims. They'll receive none from us." The human teams prepared for deployment with practiced efficiency. They checked weapons, tested communications, synchronized timers. Pelmike noticed they barely spoke. They communicated through hand signals and brief gestures, moving like parts of a single organism. As they prepared to leave, Pelmike made one final appeal. "Captain Mitchell, please, at least give them a chance to surrender. A chance to lay down their weapons and face trial." "Observer, do you know what happened the last time we offered Krell forces a chance to surrender?" Pelmike shook his head. "They pretended to comply. When our forces moved in to disarm them, the Krell detonated explosives hidden among prisoners. Killed 37 Council civilians and 4 of our medics who were treating the wounded. Since then, no mercy protocol is standard for any Krell forces caught committing atrocities." The human teams disappeared into the darkness, moving silently toward their objective. Pelmike was left in the command vehicle with a single human technical specialist who monitored communications and drone feeds. "You should watch," the specialist said, gesturing to the displays. "You're here to observe, right? So observe. See what we do when monsters prey on the innocent." Pelmike watched. The assault began at exactly the designated time. The humans moved through the complex like water flowing through cracks. They appeared in locations that should have been secure, materialized from shadows and ventilation shafts and drainage pipes. The Krell never had a chance to sound a general alarm. The first Krell died without ever knowing humans were in the complex. A sentry, standing at his post, simply collapsed. His companion turned to check on him and fell as well. 2 silent shots from a suppressed weapon, ending both lives in less than a second. Ghost Element reached the detention block and began extracting prisoners. Mike watched as humans moved through the cells, cutting restraints, speaking softly to terrified civilians, guiding them to safety. The same operators who killed without hesitation were now gentle with traumatized prisoners, offering water and medical attention. Meanwhile, Wraith Element was cutting through the Krell command staff. Mitchell led his team through the command center with brutal efficiency. Every Krell who reached for a weapon died. Every Krell who tried to run died. Every Krell who attempted to activate security protocols died. The engagement was over in less than 2 minutes. Shadow and Reaper elements cleared the facility level by level. Mike watched as they encountered resistance and eliminated it with overwhelming force. When Krell tried to fortify positions, the humans used grenades and breaching charges. When Krell attempted to use prisoners as shields, the humans shot through non-lethal areas of the hostages to kill the Krell behind them, then immediately provided medical treatment to the wounded civilians. It was methodical, it was brutal, it was absolutely effective. The entire operation took 47 minutes from first breach to final all clear. Over 300 Krell dead, 2,000 prisoners liberated. Human casualties, 3 wounded, none fatal. When the teams returned to the command vehicle, Mike noticed something that disturbed him. The humans weren't celebrating. They weren't excited or energized by their victory. They were quiet, professional, already focused on the next mission. This wasn't an extraordinary achievement for them. This was just their job. Mitchell approached Mike with a data drive. Full combat footage, observer. Every camera, every body cam, every drone feed, for your report. The council should see exactly what we do. Mike took the drive with shaking hands. You killed them all. Every single Krell in that complex. There were no prisoners, no captured enemy, just bodies. That's correct, Mitchell confirmed. No mercy protocol. They were executing civilians. The penalty for that is death. You're not soldiers, Mike said quietly. Soldiers fight other soldiers. You're executioners. Lieutenant Reeves, overhearing the conversation, stepped closer. You're right, observer. In this situation, we were executioners. We executed mass murderers. And we'll do it again, every single time we find Krell or anyone else slaughtering innocents. That's why we exist. That's our purpose. Sergeant Diaz added, the galaxy has lived in peace for so long that you've forgotten what it takes to maintain peace. You've forgotten that sometimes, to protect the innocent, you need people willing to do terrible things to terrible people. That's us. We're the terrible things that go bump in the night for the monsters. Mike looked at the humans surrounding him. Their faces were hard, their eyes cold. But when he had watched them with the freed prisoners, those same faces had been kind, those same eyes gentle. They were capable of switching between mercy and ruthlessness in an instant, depending on who they were dealing with. I don't know if what you do is right or wrong, Mike admitted. I don't know if your methods are justified or if they make you as bad as your enemies. But I know those 2,000 prisoners are alive because of you. Mitchell nodded once. That's all the justification we need, observer. At the end of the day, the innocent are safe and the guilty are punished. Everything else is just philosophy. The humans packed up their gear and prepared to move to the next objective. Mike added another chapter to his growing report, trying to put into words what he had witnessed. The council had asked for documentation of human warfare. They were getting it. He just didn't know if they would understand what it meant when they read it. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Every seat was filled. Every species sent their highest-ranking representatives. The vast chamber buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages, all filtered through the translation matrix into an incomprehensible murmur of concern and confusion. Ambassador Thelnox stood at the central podium, his blue skin pale with stress. Before him floated hundreds of data crystals, each containing reports from Council observers embedded with human military forces. 2 months had passed since the Krell invasion began. 2 months since humanity had deployed its special forces, and in that time, everything had changed. Esteemed Council members, Thelnox began, his voice strained. We are here to discuss the human military operations in Council space. I have compiled reports from 47 different observers across all 3 contested worlds. What they have documented is both remarkable and deeply troubling. The central display activated, showing a tactical map of the war. The Krell Imperium, which had terrorized Council space for 50 years, had withdrawn from all 3 occupied worlds. Their military forces were in full retreat. Intelligence suggested internal chaos within the Imperium itself. The humans have achieved in 2 months what we could not accomplish in decades, Thelnox continued. The Krell are defeated, their forces shattered, their will to fight broken. But the method of this victory raises serious questions about the nature of humanity and their place in our council. He pulled up combat footage. The assembled representatives watched in silence as human special forces conducted operations. They saw small teams moving through darkness with impossible stealth. They saw Krell soldiers dying before they could raise an alarm. They saw precision strikes that eliminated enemy leadership with surgical accuracy. They saw rescued prisoners and liberated cities. But they also saw the brutality, the cold efficiency, the absolute ruthlessness with which humans conducted war. A Chitauri representative clicked for attention. Ambassador Thelnox, these images show human forces operating with minimal oversight. They make battlefield decisions independently, often with no command authorization. How can we trust forces that operate with such autonomy? Thelnox nodded grimly. That is precisely the concern. Human Special Forces commanders have something they call mission-type orders. They are given an objective and allowed to accomplish it however they see fit. The results are effective, but the methods are often extreme. He pulled up a new file. This is a psychological profile of human Special Forces operators, compiled by our Xenopsychology department. The findings are disturbing. A hologram appeared showing a human in combat gear. Data scrolled beside the image as Thelnox read from the report. Human Special Forces selection has a failure rate exceeding 70%. Candidates undergo months of physical and psychological stress designed to break them. They are deprived of sleep, subjected to extreme cold and heat, starved, and exposed to simulated torture. Those who survive this process are fundamentally changed. They develop a tolerance for violence and hardship that would incapacitate any of our soldiers. A Nephel representative's containment sphere pulsed with confused colors. Why would they volunteer for such treatment? This makes no sense from an evolutionary perspective. Dr. Shellam, a council xenopsychologist, approached the podium. Her voice was somber as she explained. Because humans are different from us in a fundamental way. Every species in this council evolved from prey animals or peaceful herbivores. We developed intelligence as a survival mechanism against predators. Humans evolved as apex predators. They are the only sapient species in council space that hunted other animals for survival. The chamber fell silent. This fact was known, but rarely discussed. It made everyone uncomfortable. Dr. Shalem continued, humans carry predatory instincts in their genetics. Pack hunting behavior. Persistence hunting that drives prey to exhaustion. The ability to track and kill other living things without remorse. Their special forces training doesn't create these instincts. It refines them. It takes the predator that exists in every human and sharpens it into a weapon. She pulled up more data. But here's what makes them truly formidable. Humans also evolved strong social bonds. They have an instinct to protect their group, their pack. This creates a paradox. They are capable, of extreme violence against enemies, while simultaneously displaying extreme compassion for those they consider allies or innocents. Video footage played showing this dichotomy. In one scene, a human operator eliminated 3 Krell guards with cold efficiency, his movements precise and lethal. In the next scene, the same operator knelt before a terrified child, speaking softly, offering comfort and protection. The transformation was instant and complete. "They are predators who choose their prey," Dr. Shalem said. "This is what makes them so effective and so terrifying. They can switch between mercy and ruthlessness in a heartbeat." Observer Pelmike stepped forward, having been summoned to provide direct testimony. His report had been the most detailed and had caused the greatest concern among council members. "Honorable representatives," Pelmike began, "I spent 2 months embedded with human special forces. I watched them conduct over 30 combat operations. I saw things that will stay with me forever. But I also learned something important about humans that our files and profiles don't capture." He activated his personal recordings. "Humans understand war in a way we don't. We see war as an unfortunate necessity, something to be conducted with honor and rules. Humans see war as something that must be won as quickly and decisively as possible to minimize suffering." The footage showed a conversation between Pelmike and Captain Mitchell after a particularly brutal engagement. Mitchell's words played through the chamber. "Every day this war continues, more innocents die. Our job isn't to fight honorably. Our job is to end the fighting. If being ruthless with our enemies saves even one civilian life, then we'll be ruthless without hesitation." Pelmike continued, "The humans have a saying, war is hell. They don't romanticize it. They don't glorify it. They see it as a terrible thing that sometimes becomes necessary. And when it becomes necessary, they believe in fighting with absolute commitment until the enemy can no longer threaten the innocent." A recording played of Sergeant Diaz explaining human military philosophy. "We don't want to be the galaxy's warriors. We want to be the galaxy's last resort. When everything else fails, when diplomacy and negotiation and peaceful solutions don't work, when the monsters come out of the dark to hurt the helpless, that's when you call us. We're the nightmare that keeps other nightmares in check." The Viridian ambassador, whose homeworld had been one of the planets liberated by human forces, spoke up. "I understand the Council's concerns about human methods, but I must point out that my people are alive because of those methods. The Krell showed no mercy to their victims. They executed civilians, destroyed cities, committed atrocities that will scar my species for generations. The humans stopped them. Yes, they were brutal. Yes, they were ruthless. But they were brutal and ruthless to the brutal and ruthless. Is that not justice?" Thelnox shook his head. "The question isn't whether human actions were effective. The question is whether we want a species in our council that fights this way. Whether we can trust a species whose soldiers are trained to be killers." Dr. Shalem interrupted. "Ambassador Thelnox, every soldier is trained to be a killer. The difference is that human soldiers are honest about it. They don't pretend war is clean or honorable. They acknowledge it for what it is and prepare accordingly." She pulled up comparative data. "I've analyzed combat footage from every council species military forces. We all kill in war, but we do it inefficiently, with hesitation, with outdated notions of fairness. Humans kill efficiently, without hesitation, with a clear understanding that the fastest way to end killing is to win decisively." New footage appeared, showing Krell military broadcasts from their homeworld. The council members watched as Krell news programs, normally filled with propaganda about military strength, now featured something unprecedented: fear. Krell military analysts discussed human tactics with obvious trepidation. They showed training videos teaching Krell soldiers defensive measures against human special operations. The Imperium, which had built its identity on conquest and military supremacy, was learning how to defend itself, because they were terrified of human retaliation. "The Krell are afraid," Felnox observed. "The most aggressive military power in known space is afraid of humans. What does that say about the humans?" "It says they're effective," the Viridian ambassador replied. "It says that bullies and warmongers now have something to fear. For 50 years, the Krell terrorized us because they knew we wouldn't fight back effectively. Now they know there are consequences for their actions." A young council member from a species that had recently joined stood up. "I have reviewed all the evidence. I have one question. In all these operations, in all these battles, how many council civilians did human forces harm? How many innocents died from human action?" Pelmike checked his data. In 2 months of operations across 3 worlds, human forces caused 0 civilian casualties. 0. They went to extreme lengths to avoid harming innocents, even when it put them at tactical disadvantage. The young council member continued. "And how many council civilians did they save?" "Over 70,000, Pelmike replied. "Direct rescues from Krell captivity." "Then I fail to see the problem," the young representative said. "Humans killed our enemies and saved our people. They did exactly what we asked them to do. The fact that they did it efficiently and with methods we find uncomfortable is our problem, not theirs." The chamber erupted in debate. Some agreed, arguing that results mattered more than methods. Others insisted that the council must maintain ethical standards, even in warfare. The argument raged for hours. Finally, the High Chancellor called for silence. The ancient being's voice creaked through the chamber. "The council faces a choice. We can reject humanity because they fight in ways that disturb us. Or we can accept that sometimes, to protect civilization, we need people willing to do uncivilized things. The humans did not create this war. They did not force us to ask for help. But when we called, they answered, and they answered with the full measure of their capability." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The question is not whether humans are too violent for our council. The question is whether our council is strong enough to accept humans as they are. Predators, yes. Warriors, yes. But also protectors who put themselves between the innocent and the monsters." The vote was called. It would determine not just humanity's place in the council, but the council's understanding of its own survival in a galaxy that was far more dangerous than they had wanted to believe. The voting chamber was silent. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated areas, each contemplating the decision before them. The question displayed on the central screen was simple. Should humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council? But everyone in the chamber understood the real question being asked. Were they ready to accept what humanity represented? Ambassador Felnox stood before the assembly, his blue skin no longer pale with stress, but settled into a calm resignation. He had spent 3 months reviewing human military operations, reading observer reports, watching combat footage, and interviewing the humans themselves. His perspective had changed, though not in the way he had expected. "Esteemed representatives," he began, "I was the one who argued most strongly against human membership. I showed you their violent history. I warned you about their special forces. I called them too savage, too dangerous for civilized society. I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Felnox raised a hand for silence. "I was not wrong about what humans are," he continued. "They are indeed predators. They are indeed capable of terrible violence. Their methods in warfare are brutal and disturbing. But I was wrong about what that means for the Council. I spent the last 3 months trying to understand why humans fight the way they do. I spoke with their soldiers, their commanders, their historians, and I learned something that changed everything." He activated the display, showing images of Earth's history, wars and conflicts spanning thousands of years, but also images of peace, of rebuilding, of humans helping humans in the aftermath of destruction. Humans have been at war with themselves for their entire history, Felnox said. But they have also been learning from those wars. Every conflict taught them something. Every atrocity showed them what they never wanted to become. They developed rules of warfare specifically because they understood how terrible war could be. They created laws to protect civilians because they knew what happened when civilians were not protected. New images appeared, showing human military training. Not the violent combat exercises, but the other training that observers had documented. Ethics classes, law of war instruction, rules of engagement briefings. Human Special Forces operators undergo extensive training in ethical decision-making, Felnox explained. They learn not just how to fight, but when to fight and why to fight. They are taught to discriminate between combatants and civilians, to protect the innocent even at cost to themselves, to use the minimum force necessary to accomplish their mission. Observer Pelmike approached the podium, joining Felnox. I observed something during my time with human forces, he said. Every single operation began with the same question. How do we accomplish this mission with the least loss of life? Not just their own lives, but all lives, including enemy lives when possible. The humans didn't kill because they enjoyed it. They killed because it was necessary to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. He pulled up footage from the final operation on Sanctuary 7. A Krell unit had surrendered, throwing down their weapons after being surrounded by human forces. The humans could have eliminated them easily. Instead, they accepted the surrender, provided medical treatment to wounded Krell, and transferred them to council custody for trial. They showed mercy when mercy was possible, Pelmike said. They showed ruthlessness when ruthlessness was necessary. That is not savagery. That is discipline. Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth stood and requested permission to address the council. The High Chancellor granted it with a gesture. Sarah walked to the center of the chamber, her small frame somehow commanding attention from beings many times her size. Honorable council members, I won't pretend that humanity is peaceful. We're not. We carry violence in our genetics, in our history, in our culture. We are predators who learn to think, and that makes us dangerous. But it also makes us capable of choice. She gestured to the images of human military operations. Our Special Forces operators volunteer for service. They choose to undergo brutal training. They choose to put themselves in harm's way. And they choose to fight in a way that protects those who cannot fight for themselves. That choice, that willingness to be the monsters that hunt monsters, that's what we offer the Council. Sarah activated a new display showing Earth's military doctrine. We have a principle in human warfare: proportionality. When the Krell attacked civilians, we responded with overwhelming force. When they surrendered, we accepted their surrender. We don't fight for conquest or glory. We fight to win, and then we stop fighting. She pulled up statistics that made several council members shift uncomfortably. In 2 months of combat operations, human forces eliminated over 15,000 Krell combatants. We lost 37 personnel. We could have reduced our casualties to 0 by using weapons of mass destruction, orbital bombardment, or chemical weapons. We possess all of these capabilities. We chose not to use them because they would have risked council civilian lives. A Chitauri representative clicked for attention. Ambassador Chen, your forces were incredibly effective against the Krell. But the Krell are a known quantity. How do we know human forces won't turn that effectiveness against council members? Sarah met the representative's compound eyes without flinching. Because we choose our enemies carefully. We don't fight for territory or resources. We fight against those who prey on the weak. If a council member ever decided to attack civilians, to commit genocide, to become what the Krell became, then yes, we would oppose them with the same force. But that's not a threat. That's a promise to protect the principles this council was founded on. The High Chancellor leaned forward. What you describe is vigilante justice. Who decides when force is justified? Who holds humanity accountable? You do, Sarah replied simply. We're not asking for autonomy, we're asking for membership. We'll follow council law, submit to council oversight, accept council judgment. But when the council faces an existential threat, when diplomacy fails, and civilians are dying, we ask that you let us do what we do best. Let us be your last resort. Felnox spoke again. The council has lived in relative peace for centuries. We've forgotten that peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is something that must be protected, sometimes with force. We've grown soft, because we've never faced a real threat. The Krell reminded us that there are species in this galaxy who don't respect diplomacy or law. Humanity is offering to be our defense against such species. Dr. Shalom added her analysis. From a xenopsychological perspective, humanity's offer makes sense. They are predators, but they are also social creatures with a strong sense of justice. They want to protect, not conquer. Their entire history shows a pattern of defending allies and opposing aggressors. Yes, they're dangerous, but dangerous allies are better than no allies when truly dangerous enemies appear. The Viridian ambassador stood, his voice firm. My people were dying. The Krell were executing us in the streets. The council's forces could not help us. But humans came. They fought and bled for people they had never met, on a world they had never seen, for no reason except that we asked for help. That is not savagery. That is heroism. The debate continued for hours. Arguments for and against human membership were presented, analyzed, and discussed. Some representatives remained convinced that humans were too dangerous. Others argued that excluding humanity would be a grave strategic error. The council was divided. Finally, the High Chancellor called for the vote. The question before this council is clear. Do we accept humanity as full members, including incorporating their military forces into our defense structure? Cast your votes. The voting system activated. Each representative entered their decision privately. The chamber waited in tense silence as the votes were tallied. The results appeared on the central display. 32 in favor, 15 against. The motion passed. Sarah Chen closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her features. Humanity was now a full member of the Galactic Council. But the vote came with conditions. The High Chancellor read the terms. Humanity is granted full council membership with the following stipulations. Human Special Forces will serve as the Council's rapid response force, deployed only in cases of existential threats or mass atrocities. All deployments must be authorized by Council vote. Human forces will submit to Council oversight and investigation of any alleged violations. In return, humanity receives all rights and protections of Council membership. Sarah accepted the terms without hesitation. Earth agrees to these conditions. The chamber began to empty as representatives departed to inform their governments of the decision. Felnox approached Sarah, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting he had learned. Ambassador Chen, he said, I must ask you something. Your special forces operators, the ones I call demons, do they understand what they've become? Do they know what it costs to be the galaxy's monsters? Sarah's expression grew somber. They know, Ambassador. Every one of them knows. That's part of why we choose our operators so carefully. They have to be strong enough to do terrible things, but also strong enough to carry the weight of having done them. It's not a burden we place lightly on anyone. And if the time comes when the Council faces another threat, Felnox asked, what then? Then you call us, Sarah replied, and we'll come. That's what we do. We stand between the darkness and the light. We're not proud of the things we do in that darkness, but we're willing to do them so others don't have to. Felnox watched her walk away, and he understood finally what humanity offered the Council. Not peace, but protection. Not gentleness, but guardianship. The humans would be the Council's predators, hunting the predators that threaten civilized society. 3 years later, A new threat emerged at the galaxy's edge. Long-range sensors detected a fleet of unknown origin moving toward Council space. The ships were massive, their hulls covered in organic material that resisted scanning. They had already destroyed 2 independent colonies, leaving nothing but debris in their wake. The Council convened an emergency session. Intelligence reports were grim. The entity, which Council scholars called the Ravagers, showed no interest in communication or negotiation. They simply consumed everything in their path. The High Chancellor addressed the chamber. "I propose activating the Rapid Response Force. All in favor?" The vote was unanimous. Sarah Chen received the authorization and immediately activated emergency protocols. Across human military installations, alert sirens wailed. Special forces operators, some pulled from training exercises, others from well-deserved leave, reported to their units. Captain Mitchell, now promoted to major, stood before his team. Wraith Element had grown, incorporating lessons learned from the Krell campaign. They were better equipped, better trained, and battle-hardened from dozens of operations protecting Council interests. "Listen up," Mitchell said, his voice carrying the same calm authority it had 3 years ago. "We've got a new mission. Unknown hostiles, designated Ravagers, are approaching Council space. They've destroyed 2 colonies. No survivors, no communication attempts, just destruction." He pulled up tactical data showing the Ravager fleet. The ships looked like nothing in Council records. They moved with organic fluidity, suggesting biological technology far beyond anything humanity or the Council possessed. "Intelligence is limited," Mitchell continued. "We don't know their capabilities, their weaknesses, or their objectives. We're going in blind against an enemy that's already proven lethal. This is going to be the hardest fight we've faced." One of the younger operators, a woman who had joined after the Krell War, asked, "What are our orders, sir?" Mitchell's expression hardened into the look that Pelmike had once called demonic. It was the look of a predator preparing to hunt. "We find out what they are, how they fight, and how to kill them. Then we kill as many as necessary to protect Council civilians. Same mission as always. We're the Nightmares. Time to remind the galaxy why monsters should be afraid of the dark." Wraith Element moved to their dropship. As they boarded, Mitchell paused and looked back at Earth in the distance. Somewhere on that planet, children were playing, families were gathering for dinner, people were living their lives in peace. They would never know about the Ravagers. They would never know about the battle about to begin at the galaxy's edge. That was how it should be, Mitchell thought. The civilians stayed safe. The predators went hunting. That was the deal humanity made with the Council, and with itself. As the dropship lifted off, carrying Earth's demons toward a new war, Mitchell allowed himself a grim smile. The Ravagers, whatever they were about to learn the same lesson the Krell had learned. There were worse things in the galaxy than monsters.